All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to ANC3C's Safe, Sustainable, and Equitable Transportation Committee meeting. My name is Swali Siddiqui. I am the chair of the committee. No decisions will be made at this meeting. This is a meeting just to discuss issues in the community and also just give updates and have discussions. The only agenda item we have for today is an update on the Connecticut Avenue multimodal study. So I'll provide a brief update of where things are right now, and then we'll just have a general discussion of what next steps might be and what we want to do about it. So that's the one agenda item for today. I wanted to ask if anyone else had any other agenda items they would like to add to the meeting. Let me uh I just opened up the chat too, so everyone should be able to chat with everyone. We don't have that big of a group. Um Wonderful. So while hearing none, I will start with an update on where the Connecticut Avenue multimodal study stands. For those that might not, whoops, what happened here? Huh, there we go. I'm going to post a link to the agenda in the chat, just in case. I know there's only one agenda item. And the agenda item just goes to the public meeting that occurred for the for the DDOT study. So I'll give an update of where things are. So um, just pure history. In December 2021, the mayor chose concept C for to be implemented on Connecticut Avenue. And DDOT was supposed to engage the community and talk about design and next steps. Fast forward to April, and at a budget hearing, at an oversight hearing, the acting director of DDOT announced that protected bike lanes won't be part of Connecticut Avenue anymore. Um, and then on June 3rd, we had a meeting where DDOT presented a new concept for Connecticut Avenue. This concept was not discussed as any of the first four or even five concepts that DDOT had put together initially at the study. So this is a completely new concept, and we've heard about it first at on June 3rd. I can tell you that our ANC, in its budget letter that was sent, requested that if there's any funding for this project, that uh, the council should mandate that a protected bike lane be part of the project for any funding to go towards this project. Council actually, the Committee on Transportation and Environment actually put it in the draft budget. However, Chairman Mendelson removed that requirement. There was a council vote today, but this wasn't discussed, and this will likely be discussed later on during the BSA meeting that council has. We don't know what council will do. At this point, I think our ANC has made it clear to council and voted and told council that they should not be. And we've also outlined why this project is dangerous. And I'm also happy to give a summary. And while I pause for a second, I will go look for the link to the slides to the project as well. So today that was the general update. I'm going to pause for a second if anyone else wants to add anything. I will tell everyone, let me describe a little bit about the project verbally, and then I will get the presentation. The project essentially isn't, even though they call it a multimodal and safety project, it's definitely not a multimodal project. It's designed for one thing. It's just designed to increase parking on Connecticut Avenue. The project essentially just takes the most extreme lanes and adds parking all over the avenue, throughout the avenue. It also includes bulb outs as well. And pretty much any other mode other than parking is compromised. So even if you're driving, you have one less lane to drive in. If you're on the bus stops that were sort of improved through Concept C, that improvement is gone. If you are bicycling, you are probably most in danger right now, primarily because people, at least during rush hour, used to bike on the most extreme lane. Now they'll have to bike in the middle of the middle lane of Connecticut Avenue. That is a humongous danger of getting doored. It's also cars will be darting in and out trying to look for parking, and so will buses, because buses don't have their dedicated stops anymore. So buses will be darting in and out of traffic as well. For any of you that drive on Connecticut Avenue when parking restrictions are not in place, you know that people often use that third parking lane to try and speed in front of cars. So it'll also be dangerous for drivers and pedestrians in that way, because there's plenty of parts of Connecticut Avenue where that parking is really just not even needed. DDOT has also not have any plans for accessible parking spots on Connecticut Avenue. They had specific plans for accessible parking. And then finally, for pedestrians, this is also dangerous, primarily because of all the issues I said of how speeding cars and how it'll, it'll move bicyclists and scooters on sidewalks. So there'll be conflict between bicycle riders and scooter riders on the sidewalks. It'll be dangerous for pedestrians in that way. And then DDOT is also proposing to remove crosswalks. Now, just want to clarify, legally, a crosswalk is any intersection. If it's marked or not, that's what DDOT decides. So basically, DDOT is deciding to remove crosswalk markings. The crosswalk will still be there, but they're deciding to remove markings from some locations. And I wouldn't be surprised if they remove the hawk crossing signal, on that is in Cleveland Park as well, and that goes across the businesses. The thinking there is Connecticut Avenue is too dangerous to have crosswalks, so we should not lull pedestrians into a false sense of security. I also want to point out that the crosswalk at the corner of Kanawha and Connecticut was where someone was killed by a driver. And they're providing that reason why they're removing those crosswalk markings, because they believe that that crosswalk should not be crossed upon. So that's the summary of the project. I guess the one small aspect is that it does add parking on the business district. If you can see that as an advantage. I think one of the complaints for Concept C that people brought up was, Connecticut Avenue is an evacuation route. We can't put it down to 2 lanes for evacuation. Well, that's happening. People were worried about emergency vehicles having access to the curb. Well, that's going to be even worse. It's much easier to go across a bike lane to access the curb than go across a lane of parked cars. So all the dangers that people were worried about with Concept C, and none of the advantages, they're all here in this new concept. Anyways, that was my summary. I'm going to pause for a second, see if anyone else has any comments that they would like to add to that summary. And as we do, we'll let committee members go first if anyone wants to raise their hand. And again, while people are raising their hands, I will go and look for the link to the slides as well. Warren, go ahead. Floor is yours.
So my view is that right now it's silly to push for the reinstitution of the bike lanes. It's obviously not happening. But my hope is that we could at least stop this plan, because I think this plan does more harm than good. Starting with the fact that the congestion of this plan, where there's only 2 lanes of traffic, so buses are going to take up 1 lane. I'm fearing crazy maneuvers by car drivers stuck behind buses. And I think that the congestion is going to result in incredible overflow onto side streets, which will make them more dangerous. It obviously prevents, not in the future, it would prevent it would be huge expense to have bike lanes or high-speed bus lanes like New York City has. My view is that, yes, traffic calming measures are certainly appropriate, but they shouldn't be all sticks and no carrots. And so for example, in New York, when they took out a lane of traffic on First and Second Avenue, what they gave the residents instead was an incredible high-speed bus lane. You can go from 125th Street down to 14th now in it's unbelievable, in 10 minutes. So that actually reduced congestion, because now older people who used to take cabs and Ubers now can take a bus. They don't have to walk down into a dark subway, down flights of stairs. I think that it needs to be, this plan is just pure pain for residents. Just let's create congestion so that we can slow down traffic. I fear it's going to end like the Georgetown thing did, where in 2012 they put in this very expensive thing with left turn lanes, and they took out and then it took out a lane of traffic. And then a year later, Mary Cheh, then the council member, insisted that they removed the whole thing. It cost like $10 million, $5 million to build it and $5 million to remove it. And here it's 26 million, I think. So I'm just wondering if we come to a consensus that we don't like this plan, what are our options to try to block it? If that's where we are. That's where I am, but I don't know where the rest of your committee is.
So I'll answer that question and then we'll go to Commissioner Prinzo who has his hand up. So Warren, we've already voted to try and block this plan through the budget process. Our ANC is pretty, almost unanimous. In fact, the vote on the budget letter was unanimous, to like restrict those funds. So that's where I believe our ANC stands. We just have to find the next thing we can do, right? Like the budget process is one part where we can stop this project.
Could you use
Um,
litigation? Could you use, I mean, like, have they gone through the appropriate administrative
uh,
processes and things like that?
I mean the I mean the honestly, like this is the frustration, right? Like ANC's anything, well, litigation, I don't think we can sue the government. But ANC's, the DC government is supposed to give ANC's great weight. DSC, the government has failed to give us great weight so far for everything else, right? The ANC's already like have done everything they could. So at this point, I mean, I believe the only option is we elect a new mayor. Or we stop the project, which is what you're saying. So I think we're trying through the budget process to stop the project, and I think depending on where the budget process turns out, then we'll come back for next steps. Before Commissioner Pagets, I do want to get to her. We do have I do want to talk about solutions next too. Once we do this, and Commissioner Pagets also had a really good idea on some community engagement things. So we'll get to that. Commissioner Prinzo, go ahead.
Thank you. I am going to echo a little bit of what Warren said. I, not necessarily, I mean, I'm obviously very in support of the bike lanes, but my bigger concern here is, in fact, the buses, because this is going to force a backup of like unforeseen circumstances on the L2, and it's going to make the L2 to like get to a point where it's not usable, and it's going to force people who normally take the L2 to either walk to their closest red line metro and force a lot of people onto the metro, which in its current state, I during rush hour cannot handle more people. So it's either going to force them to take the metro, or it's going to just force them to drive. So I just think there's no consideration given, because obviously I think they even stated it that Connecticut Avenue is not a priority for a bus lane because of the red line that runs underneath it, which I totally understand, but there are people that don't live, like for some people the L2 is right outside their door, whereas they have to walk a mile to a metro stop. So I just think like that wasn't really fully articulated in this plan. I mean, like Metro cannot handle an additional like 5 to 600 people a day. It's already overcrowded. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, and I'm gonna add something to the notes because the better bus network is also coming out. So there's gonna be new sort of bus lines that are like, also like different from right now. And so there's no planning going on with that in terms of like how those will turn up and how change will happen. I'm sorry, might mispronounce your name, Mr. Latower. Is that how I do it?
That's great, Saleh.
All right, thanks.
And you can just call me Samuel. But
All right,
I
thank you,
think I've
Samuel.
met a handful of y'all at an event a while back up at Nanny O'Brien's in Cleveland Park. But good to be with you. I live in Woodley Park. My only question is, when it comes to this new plan, which I'm in complete agreement with you, Saleh, this is just the absolute worst possible scenario for everyone involved. But when it comes to making the best of this situation, is there any way that we can at least lobby to allow the bulb outs but prevent crosswalks from being removed from Connecticut Avenue?
So DDOT has promised that there'll be an engagement process on the design. Um, And so what they will say is, sure, of course you can. And we might be able to do this. What I will tell you is, given our experience, is we can't believe like, I mean, I'm honestly, I'm at the point where I don't believe DDOT anymore, right? Regarding this project. Like, so they will say, sure, we'll work with you, but I think given, and I will say that this is only a hunch, right? Given that the first thing they presented had crosswalks being taken out, my hunch is they want to remove more crosswalks and they're easing us into like the bad stuff because they knew there was going to be a backlash once they presented it. They
Yep.
didn't have to present that crosswalks are going to be removed. But in my mind, they've made certain decisions. So yeah. And I'll also say with the bulb outs, there's 2 or 3 things about the bulb outs that also worry me. So technically, when you add bulb outs, but there's already parking there, that tends to be dangerous because again, cars, if there's no cars parked there, cars will try and speed on that lane, and then when they approach a bulb out, they'll try and like get to the other side, especially as they get close to an intersection. The other thing that the bulb outs do is, and this is the bigger worry, is if we let them install bulb outs, that means that we will never have a safe Connecticut Avenue prospect ever. This is like kind of this project already taken 6 years. If they spend a lot of dollars, they install bulb outs, we will never have a chance for any multimodal aspect on Connecticut Avenue, any changes for buses, nothing at all. It'll just be parking for the next 20 years until the climate takes us over. And then it's like, well, why didn't we make a different decision? So that's just my comment on the bulb outs. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, they say we will, but I don't know if we can trust them.
Yeah, that helps a lot. And the only reason I ask about the bulb outs, and I didn't know about this, or I didn't know about the the way that bulb outs set us back for 20 years plus, is just because in the instance that we could at least advocate for bike lanes a little bit down the road with bulb outs, would that make it even harder just to create a bike lane? It totally eliminates that chance. That's
completely.
That's
There'll be no chance. I mean, the DDOT engineers are saying, oh no, we can cut them out. They're not, it's not going to be there. Once we add parking and bulb outs, they're not going to take them out.
Yeah, that's helpful to know and brutal. So
Exactly.
thank you.
Commissioner Nash. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I had a question on the crosswalks. I mean, like you, I have a visceral reaction against crosswalks being taken out. However, my question is, at Conway Street and any others, are those intersections that are unsignalized? Because I know in the past, some at DDOT have expressed an aversion to crosswalks on the major avenues and unsignalized intersections. For example, there were a couple on Wisconsin Avenue that they took out because they just feel that 4 lanes or certainly 6 lanes drivers just aren't going to stop, even though they have a legal obligation to do that. So, I think it's worth just double checking if these are at unsignalized intersections only, or if it's at signalized ones, then I think we have a real problem.
Let me look at the presentation. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Commissioner Nash, but I also think it's preposterous for a transportation, a Department of Transportation to say we're going to remove pedestrian markings. I mean, it's still a legal crosswalk. You are legally allowed to cross there. They're just removing the markings. But I'll check the presentation while we let Commissioner Prinzo comment.
I'm just conveying, their view, and I don't necessarily agree. But there's an argument. If it were unsignalized, at least they have an argument. But and on the buses, we've already talked about this. Well, different people have different views on this versus C, and there are some clear disadvantages to this. Some would see some advantages, but where I have a big problem, as we talked about it, is they need to have a robust public process on this. I mean, if they were to go forward with this, there are so many details that need to shift, including on the buses. While I do think more parking is good for businesses, what I can't fathom is why they would have bus loading and unloading in a travel lane, as opposed to maintaining bus stops as they are today, where buses pull to the curb, which necessarily means that there wouldn't be parking in those locations. That's fine. It's about a balancing of interests, but the way it's configured now, as several of you, including Warren, have pointed out, it just becomes a recipe for more gridlock, and it has some of the same diversion issues. Some would say more, but at least the same diversion issues that some folks had raised about the first option C. So they have to have a process to work this through.
Yeah, and I see what you're saying, Commissioner Nash. And just to tell you why they're doing this is like, best practice for buses is so that they don't have to pull in and out and they don't jackknife in and out, because that can cause a lot of crashes and is also dangerous and takes time for the buses. The best practice is to kind of have bus stops at the far side of the signal, right? But then the problem is they're not going to be able to have a bulb out there. And so they won't be able to like, sort of go there. But I think that might be it. Although Commissioner Pagets looks like she might have an answer. So Commissioner Prinzo, is it okay if I let her go and then you go after that?
Yep.
Yeah, regarding the bus stops, they're going to try their best, allegedly with this plan, to move them all to the far side and then provide the curb extension bulb out so that the bus stop, it's not one of the floating bus stops, but it's extended to the curb. Because the problem, if you maintain the bus stop at the current curb line and you expect drivers to not park in the bus stop, that is not happening. They will park in the bus stop too. Even if there are 50 spaces around the bus stop available that's not a bus stop, that is where they will be. So, I mean, yeah, I obviously agree with like what you all are saying. As an L2 rider myself, that would be really frustrated with this whole thing. And cars are going to double park too in that travel lane, in addition to the buses trying to do what they need to do. So I just, this is a hot mess, and I don't know if it almost feels like it was done on purpose to be a complete, just not great plan. But yeah, I have a lot of comments on it, but I don't want to take everyone's time here.
Commissioner Prinzo?
So I was looking at what Janelle put in or Commissioner Pagets put in the chat. And the new L2, which I guess is the DC70, is going to replicate the red line even more so than what the current L2 does, because it's not going to go out into Adams Morgan where it could potentially make up time. It's just going straight down to DuPont. So why are they replicating what's already in exist? I know why they're replicating it, but it's just like this is the buses and two travel lanes and trying to get people from Maryland downtown. It's just, this is not gonna end well.
Adam, I've heard that they've been getting a lot of comments about in the comment period with the current Better Bus Network strategy about that L2 not dipping into Adams Morgan and cutting off access to many more lines that are over there. So that potentially
Well,
is,
yeah, because you would have to get off at Calvert in Connecticut and either walk into Adams Morgan or wait for the 96
yeah.
or the whatever, it's the C55.
Yeah, I mean that's
So-
an obvious issue with folks in our
Oh.
neighborhoods. So
Do either of you know, Samuel has a question in the chat. Do either of you know when the Better Bus Network will be officially switched over? Like when are we?
I believe the timeline exists somewhere on that site. The current round of comment,
July 15th. I
no, the
thought
Better Bus Network.
for comment, I thought the last date of commenting was July 15th.
No. When it'll actually be implemented?
Oh no, sorry.
Like probably late 2025 at best, I believe, from what I remember from a multitude of meetings and engagement on this. Sorry, the website's being not great.
No worries.
Metro
Warren?
implement the network in 2025. Summer of 2025, sorry.
Thank you. So I had just two quick reactions to all these very helpful comments. First, to Commissioner Nash, he really put the finger on, when I said litigation, that probably wasn't the right word, but we had at least 50 public meetings before they settled on Concept C. And
70.
70. Okay, thank you. And so I don't understand how DDOT and the mayor's office can now unilaterally come up with something entirely different and not have some kind of public comment, so people could talk about, well, this is a real problem with the buses in one of the two travel lanes, that sort of thing. I mean, I don't understand if maybe that there's not some kind of requirement that they're abrogating here by simply saying, well, this is the plan now, right? And it's right, completely radically different from anything that was really proposed, but this is the plan. That's my point about the litigation. I didn't mean litigation per se, but I just wonder if they're following administrative requirements. And then second, just to your point, Commissioner Siddiqui, about once we build the bulb outs, they're going to be there. Yes, in 1964, they came up with the reversible lanes, which didn't even require much infrastructure. By 1980, the DDOT already had studies showing the danger, and people were calling for the removal. It was only because of it took another 40 years. It was the pandemic that got them to finally reverse the reversible lanes, right? So I just fear, 64 years. I mean, this plan, our successors in 2080 are going to still be living this. I mean, that's just my fear. But anyway, I'm just wondering if we had some good lawyer figuring out what the administrative requirements are.
All right. I do want to move to what do we do now, right? Let's talk a little bit about the gloom and doom. So I guess Commissioner Packets, you had a really good idea before the meeting. Is it okay if I hand it over to you and maybe we discuss that idea and then we can discuss other ideas after that? So I'll hand it over to you.
Cool. So as part of which I'm a member of, Warren's a member of, Swallow is a member of the CAC for this project, which was convened at 3:30 before the 6:30 p.m. public meeting. And short notice during a Monday afternoon, where many of us actually have to work. So DDOT kind of stepped in it a little bit with re-engaging this group, which had existed for Swallow. Warren, you've been on it longer than Swallow and I have, right? Yeah. You're on mute.
I'm not on the CAC. Sorry.
Oh, I thought you were as part of.
I'm on.
He's on the BAC.
BAC. we've sorry, not the CAC.
We have a lot of advisory committees and they don't listen to any of them. So,
Great. Oh, that's true too. So as part of the CAC committee meeting, DDOT, and I'm saying this, that I'm hoping they're going to stay true to their word with this, because past history tells me that's not the case, but let's think positively. Is that they're looking for the CAC, which is made up of a number of commissioners and other folks that have been appointed by commissioners and council member or whoever, is to help them engage better with the community in this iteration of this project. So I guess let's take them at their word and come up with some things that we think would help engage with all members of the community, not just the folks that can turn up to every single one of these meetings at 3 p.m. on a Thursday, or our ANC meetings at 7 p.m. third Monday of every month, and put those in a letter or a resolution, and then have some sort of key performance metric that we can measure them against, and we're going to hold them to responding to us and say, we don't feel like this met what we expected and kind of outlined in our recommendations. So that's kind of what my initial thought was behind this, because going to these meetings and hearing people shout the loudest and the longest is not an effective means of communicating with the entire community that's affected by this project. I mean, there's probably 20% diehards on either side, and everybody else in between, we can go out there and change that lane tomorrow, and they just be like, something seems different. I feel better, cool, and move on with their lives.
I like that. I mean, I put that down as an agenda item for us in July, is like, what kind of letter and instructions we can give DDOT on how to engage the community, utilize the CAC, like kind of say like the way to not have a CAC meeting or any other meeting for that matter is during work hours where no one can attend. It's unfortunate that we have to remind them of this, but I like that, and can also remind them of the ANC Great Wait. That ANC. So for those of you that might, well, most of you might not know this, ANC6B last night voted on a resolution that asked DDOT to give the ANCs in Ward 3 Great Wait, and that they haven't with this project. So, there's people over the city that are also sort of putting pressure on this.
Well, it's pretty easy for them to get around Great Wait
Yeah.
by saying that they're giving it, and then they find other
Yeah.
grounds to make a different decision. One sort of immediate way to move this forward is, the acting director was to speak before the ANC, not whether it's the last meeting or the meeting before that. And then, she canceled, I think, because of this new plan that they were rolling out, and they wanted to do it on their time schedule and in their system. But at a minimum, we should get her back, because that's one way to start convening the community. And you'll get different views, but at least it's a moderated discussion where she's going to have to listen to community views and help to define a process going forward. I mean, this is a big change. I mean, and so how they can implement it without a process that takes community comments and makes modifications, even if at the end of the day it looks something like what they're proposing. There are lots of ways this needs to be improved or the most glaring safety issues addressed, and they just can't pretend that whatever process occurred back with option C, when this one was never on the table.
Commissioner Packets, do you think you can email and ask her? She's not going to come, but
Yeah. By the way, they had scheduled her like a month ahead of and asked us to host her. By the way, this was not something I requested. We requested a month before, and then they canceled her like 4 hours before the meeting was supposed to start.
Isn't it also the
That
law?
plan hatched up in the 4 hours before our ANC meeting started last month? I don't know, maybe. But Rick, to your point, it made me think of like maybe bringing her, having that discussion at our meeting with her isn't about this particular project. It's more about the process, and have the community come with more of like ideas or comments or thoughts on that, rather than reactionary stuff, because we're going to hear the same stuff over and over again on this design proposal that we heard in the past. But like, let's come up with a way for more like meaningful engagement. Like if they can do pop-ups out on the street of like what this would look like other cities do mock-ups that are quick build things, that it's like, we're just going to test this here for this amount of time. Like, is that something that our folks would be interested in doing, and that DDOT would be willing to engage in, and have the conversation be framed that way? What are folks' thoughts on that?
go ahead, Warren.
I just think that's an excellent suggestion, and there is precedent. Like, for example, those failed high-speed so-called bus lanes on, I think it's 14th Street. What they did there is they just really did a few blocks, right? Which is one of the reasons it failed. But it didn't go as people had originally hoped. It was supposed to go all the way to Silver Spring from downtown DC, and they just have like a half a mile or something, right? So that's sort of like a precedent for the idea that you could try to test the concept. in a few areas. They have done that. That's all.
All right, I'll ask a question. How would you all feel about, I mean, this is like me dreaming that DDOT actually listens to us and is like, we don't want this parking. How would you all feel about dedicated bus lanes on Connecticut Avenue that only buses and bicyclists could use?
I was approached by somebody who may or may not work for Mayor Muriel Bowser that said, and I am quoting, bus lanes will never happen on Connecticut Avenue. So
WMATA will block them.
no, I don't think it would be WMATA. I think it would be EOM.
Oh, okay. So the mayor will never.
But
Okay.
I am not opposed to asking for them because so their reasoning was like what I was saying is that they don't see Connecticut Avenue as a bus priority lane because of the red
Right.
line that exists underground.
Yep.
But
Okay.
the L2 was never meant to replicate the red line. So I don't see a problem in asking and trying to get something done, but just have that in the back of your head.
I guess, okay, here's another question then, just to prompt us. Would you all prefer the concept they presented or the current status quo for the long run? I mean, I know for the short run, the current status quo is better because then we can get a better plan later, but like,
I would I I think so. I got flex posts outside of 3100 Connecticut and out in front of the zoo now, to prevent wildly dangerous illegal U-turns that have been occurring that I've complained about for years. And those just popped up out of nowhere. I went to bed on Saturday night and Sunday morning I woke up and flex posts. So I'm curious to know, and I was not told that those were coming. I don't think anybody else was. And they just appeared. Like, are they going to be doing this piecemeal stuff? Like, because flex post is easier to take out than a bulb out. I'll tell you that much. Like,
Some cars take them out on their own.
Rick, I'm checking on my babies every day. They're all still standing.
I saw an Amazon truck just come in and take out 4 in front of my apartment building one day, and it was really something.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, Swally, to your question about, is the status quo better than this? I mean, I don't know. In some ways it would be, but and our job is to represent the community, but in a sense, it's sort of hard to, I think this is kind of a question for the community, right? And this is why we need, a real public process. It's there, as I said, there are some, some people would say there are some enhancements, certainly parking's important to the businesses. So I think, my own view is something that dispenses with that would probably be controversial. But, I think the community has to weigh in. And to your earlier question about bus lanes, where bikes could ride versus, the current situation. Did they present a bus lane alternative at the time they consider option C? Well, there
No.
again, that ought to be one of the alternatives, I think, that could be also part of a public process. They may not go for it. Of course, Metro only runs as far as Van Ness before it juts almost a mile west. But it's like anything else where you look at various options, including a no build option, a status quo option. I think 2 or 3 things should be on the table.
Mr. Prinzo?
So I just, to your point, I guess my question slash comment slash frustration is I know we don't like we as a community feel like we went through 70 public meetings to get to concept C, and at the end of the day they obviously decided to just go their own way. is there, do we want to, and I'm all for it because I just love hanging out with all of my fellow ANC commissioners every day of the week. I think we need to tell DDOT, you need to undertake a robust public engagement before you touch like a piece of gravel on the road, because this is going to affect the area for the next like 30-ish, maybe lifetime years. And they came into that meeting on June 3rd, like, we have the money, this is what we're doing, be gone with everybody else. And if the community, I know there was widespread anger about the bike lanes. I know there were people that were obviously very in support of the bike lanes. There were people that were obviously very opposed to the bike lanes. I haven't seen anybody really come out and be like, this plan is like Jesus came down and parted the Red Sea and made Connecticut Avenue great again, which I did not intend to do that. But, I just, there hasn't been, and I mean, even the council member hasn't come out in support or in opposition of this plan. He's just made like it exists kind of statement. And unless I've missed like something from him, because for some reason his emails are going to my junk. But I just, can we ask for, like, I know we can ask for a community engagement, but do we, we've obviously run the risk of, we've now done another 70 public meetings and we're back to square one where they're like, oh, well, we're just going to go ahead and do what we think is best.
I don't know. I'm very negative on this. I don't think we'll have much there. I do want to read a comment from the chat. The lack of vision is appalling, whereas they have their hands tied from pressure from MD. We honestly don't know. They haven't told us why or what. It's definitely not science. It's definitely not logic. It's definitely not what the community wants. So I do not know what pressures they have. And it's just the mayor. It's not even, it's not, no one logical made this decision. It's just the mayor. Commissioner Pagets?
During the CIC meeting, towards the end, somebody asked a question about like the exact number of parking spaces difference between the bike lane plan and the new plan and the project. Somebody on the project team put up a slide that
Wait,
somebody else, huh?
I don't think we can talk about that, right?
Well, somebody else posted
Who
it.
cares?
So there seems to be another concept that was studied, perhaps, that included still a bike lane in there and increased parking over what was originally in the bike lane plan that must have been noodled. They couldn't have just gone from, I guess, logic, hopefully, follows that they couldn't have just gone from concept C just to like nothing at all. There had to be iterations in between there. So I'm wondering what those were and why they were eliminated.
I think it's definitely worth asking DDOT their decision process. I mean, I actually think that's a good idea. Is like, can you tell us the exact decision process you came to before you arrived to this concept, and were any other concepts considered that we do not know about?
Well, and I think Zach Ferguson from 34G is putting the FOIAs out for that.
No, his FOIAs came back. They didn't give him anything.
Shocking. But has anybody seen anybody say, because I haven't, has anybody seen anybody say like this is the best thing that's ever come to existence? Because there hasn't been, from what I've seen on the internet, on anything, like there hasn't been, sure there's been like negative reaction, but I haven't even seen, like, even the people that were opposed to the bike lane haven't really said anything, unless I'm missing it, about it. So I just, like, where's DDOT getting their community engagement from?
No, they said something about it in budget oversight, I believe. And they said that it wasn't about safety for them, it was about making it better for the businesses. So they're fine with this plan because it provides more parking for the businesses. Charles Allen asked a very direct question regarding that
Okay, thank
to
you.
the head of Save Connecticut Avenue.
Yeah, I've seen like Lee Mayer, who's one of the major persons, say, well, it's not perfect, but it's certainly better than the prior concept C in his view, things like that.
Well, but at the same time, this has a lot, you know, some of the drawbacks that others have identified in concept C. I mean, people were legitimately concerned about traffic diversion. That issue hasn't been solved, and arguably, in some respects, it could be worse if buses are, you know, blocking the outer travel lanes routinely. So, you know,
I mean,
a
Rick,
lot of issues DDOT hasn't
I will
considered.
make it, Rick, I will make you a bet right now that those concerns that folks have, they will not come up with this plan. I don't think those concerns, I will just say this, and I know it's a recorded meeting. I don't think those concerns were real. I am yet to see if there will be like dedicated groups arguing for emergency vehicles or side street traffic or evacuation route issues with this plan.
I don't know about groups, but I believe if people think about it, they'll see some of the same issues. And yes, there
Yeah,
were
I agree.
people concerned about traffic diversion. And again, this doesn't provide any mitigation for that. And as I pointed out, in some respects, it could exacerbate it.
Yep.
Hey, Swally, I would just say, I agree with you about I think the emergency vehicle thing was certainly a red herring. I actually think in just judging by the reaction in Georgetown, there really were, people were seriously upset about the traffic diversion onto the side streets. And that I think that could be.
But Warren, do you think people will come out against that for this plan? The folks that were bringing it up before with the bicycle lane.
I think they might, I think they just didn't like the bike lane. I think they're not gonna like the congestion. I think most of them are just thinking it's gonna take me much longer now to get to the Beltway. I really think that was at the heart of their concern. It wasn't because they have a great love of businesses and they were worried about parking spaces for businesses. They're just thinking, oh, it's gonna take me longer to commute to the, or like, I have a friend who lives on Upper Connecticut Avenue. He's like, oh my God, now to go to my job at 16th Street, it's gonna be another 10 minutes. I mean, he was upset about that. So yeah, I think I think that you could, you know, once people realize how the buses are gonna not have a place to exit their and entrance their passengers, I think people are gonna, I don't think people have really taken in this plan yet, totally.
Commissioner Prinzo?
I just want to tell a quick story about bike lanes and emergency vehicles. So last summer, Commissioner Prinzo decided that he was going to go to the Nationals game and get a little drunk, and then the Nationals won, and so then he decided he was going to go to the tune-in with his friends and continue getting a little drunk on Pennsylvania Avenue in Southeast, where there is a beautiful bike lane, which I believe may or may not be sponsored by the Washington Nationals because the little bulb outs make little Nationals logos, and I think it's fantastic. Be that as it may, someone in Hawk and Dove next door had a medical emergency, and let me tell you what the ambulance did. It was really wild. It just rammed the bike lane because an ambulance is built to go through the flex post, because if it needs to get somewhere, it's going to get there. And a fire truck can probably do the same exact thing. So I don't really see the emergency vehicle response thing as being a legitimate excuse, in my opinion, because I've seen it firsthand. They just ram the bike lane. And, you know, they obviously check to make sure that there's no one in the bike lane, but they stand in the bike lane for as long as they need. And I saw bikes go by and nobody seemed to care because obviously somebody needed medical emergency. They needed an ambulance. So the cyclists didn't really feel like they were in their way because that's where they needed to be at that time. So the emergency vehicle thing, excuse or fear in my mind is just like fear mongering to a point where it's like ridiculous.
Actually, I would maybe frame it a different way, you know, whether you think that the emergency vehicle argument was a red herring or not. I think for purposes of this and a public process, treat it as legitimate. Say, okay, if that was a concern, explain how this plan addresses it better. Because I don't see how it does. You know, I happen to think that, you know, there was maybe some legitimacy to the emergency vehicles, but this doesn't address it any better. And again, for reasons that we talked about with the additional congestion, it could make it worse.
So we're getting to the last 8 minutes. I just want to check if anyone else has anything else to bring up. Hey, Max.
I know I missed everything because the kids were going to sleep, but I did just
Of course.
want to express my disappointment in this whole thing. And I mean, if anything, bike lanes would help because there wouldn't be parked cars in between the emergency vehicles and helping the people. But that's not really, I mean, I'm more disappointed in the overall situation of deciding to kind of not do anything for $26 million seems, no matter what outcome, seems very strange to me. So I certainly would just express that the most the ANC could do to, I mean, I don't know what else you can do besides you've already offered your great weight behind the thing that everyone agreed on, but just the most the ANC could do to kind of continue to push for actual safety improvements would be wonderful. So thanks.
I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your last name starting with G, Gautier, and please correct me if I'm gonna ask you to unmute. Go ahead, your hand is raised. M. Gautier. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Okay, yeah, sorry, my screen kind of froze for a minute. Thank you for giving. I just wanted to speak about the traffic diversions a little bit, and I heard that in the DDOT presentations. And you know, I'm really new to this whole thing, so I don't know what the evidence is or the evidence are about that. I don't think Georgetown issues is similar to Connecticut. Just in my point of view, I doubt that people commuting from Maryland down to downtown, you know, all the way down to downtown would regularly go into side streets in order to, you know, like if a day there's a big congestion on Connecticut, yes, and that will always happen and is always going to be that. Like 34 Reno, there's only so much traffic that it can take. People will not take side street. I don't see that. So I think that's also a bit of a red herring, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I agree. And if you look at the original DDOT analysis, they actually did an analysis of diversions, and it was maybe like 2 extra cars per every traffic light cycle on Reno. So it wasn't even that much. And so yeah, it's not that much diversions. There were increasing diversions, as you said, but it's not going to be like all of Connecticut's going to go on there. Commissioner Pagets.
Yeah, I mean, with the emergency vehicle thing, we could have more emergency vehicles responding to things that aren't car accidents or car crashes, if we made the road safer. For example, last night when I came home at 6 o'clock, there was a 4-car pileup on guess where? Cathedral in Connecticut, which required the response of an ambulance and a fire truck. And a few MPD units and the zoo police were out there too. So all of those units were pulled out of service for somebody who could have needed them for having a fire in their house or a heart attack because they had to respond to a dangerous intersection, a known dangerous intersection, the most dangerous intersection in the District of Columbia. Because some cars zoomed, probably because they had too much room and a few drivers made some mistakes, right? And that's what we should really be looking to prevent. And when we want to talk about emergency vehicles, the conversation should be about diverting them to other calls rather than these car crashes that keep happening that don't need to. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk on emergency vehicles and bikes.
All right. We have 4 minutes. So I guess I'll leave us with some with at least like how I'm thinking about this, and which is really like this mayor chose to do the right thing once. She might choose to do the right thing again. Who knows? Is the right pressure, the right thing? Probably not, but there. But also, I just want to point to one of Commissioner Paggett's successes, which she was talking about this when she joined the ANC, was the Cleveland Park, former Cleveland Park Service Lane, now Promenade. That was big argument in the community for a long time. There was a plan that was a ridiculously bad plan. We would have pedestrians and cars, like conflict and stuff. And then, and I think this also goes back to Commissioner Paggett's point of like doing small pop-ups and things like that can really help, because during COVID, once they shut it down to cars and opened it to people, the community realized, wait a minute, this is great. Like we actually want it like this. And now look at that. We have a place for pedestrians that I at least never thought that was ever going to happen. And everyone loves it. I mean, even folks that like argued against it love it. And it's like it's just brought so much vibrancy to our community. So, as bad as this feels right now, I personally still have a lot of hope. And I do think like, again, the mayor can change her mind again. There can be a new mayor. But eventually, like, this is what's happening all over urban cities. Eventually, and this was what a commissioner from 6B wrote to us last night. Eventually, there's going to be bike lanes on Connecticut Avenue. It's just a matter of when. And given how urbanism is going, given how we have to tackle the climate crisis, given how cities are going, this is not going away. So, yeah, I mean, I really appreciate everyone joining the meeting. I don't know if anyone else has anything else they wanted to add, but yeah, one of the reasons why we had this meeting is because I think a lot of us still have a lot of hope and still have like the desire to kind of work for a better Connecticut Avenue. I agree. At what cost, right? Like, I mean, that's the problem of government. A lot of doings and undoings, and took a long time, but that's unfortunately the problem with our local government and how it works.
And by the way, being able to host events on that former service lane has increased the business's revenues considerably. And that's with pedestrian traffic and folks, stopping in those businesses because there's other things going on too and spending money there. So even the businesses that were very against it are seeing reaping the rewards of getting rid of or converting those 24 or some car storage spaces to spaces for people.
Now we have to figure out how to get some more funding from the city to turn it into a really attractive space with more trees and vegetation and a way to water both of them.
Plant native plants.
Native plants.
And they just take time to grow. They're there. They're working.
Yeah, well, more spaces. I mean, unfortunately it was designed the way it was, and now it's kind of a big expanse. And if they had designed it for people, they would have designed it in a different way. So it'd be nice to get more funding so over time those additional enhancements can be made.
Well, Rick, and that's 100% a lesson learned, where they should have just went full board with it being people and not this compromise mix. And then it would have been that space. And that's what this Connecticut Avenue project is turning into, where it's this mess of compromise. It's just not gonna be effective in a positive way. So that's another lesson learned from the service lane.
So we are at 8 p.m. You all know I don't like long meetings, but thank you all for joining. So we have some next steps. I think one of the things for our next meeting is Commissioner Paggett's suggestion of coming up with like a proper community engagement thing. Commissioner Nash's suggestion of seeing how to engage the director and ask her to answer some particular questions. And then let me see. Just want to make sure I have the next steps. And then, yeah, maybe the Commissioner Paggett's suggestion of like, can they start making the small improvements that we need, like the flex posts that went up over there, and if they're going to keep doing those. Well, cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining. If you have any questions or any comments, please send them our way. Otherwise, our next July meeting, we'll sort of go over those topics and come up with a letter of how to engage. All right. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.